उसमें यूज होने वाली छोटी छोटी चीजें जब स्वरूप में आती है, आकार बन जाती है, मैं मानता हूं कि आपका ऐसा सुझाव हमें अवश्य उपयोगी होगा। आप सबको मेरी ओर से हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं। धन्यवाद।
Ladies and gentlemen, he's got a flight to catch, so we're going to keep it very short. And मनसुख मांडविया जी, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आभार आपका। देखिए, न्यूज़ 18 की तो ये पहल है जो हमारे बहुत करीब है, लेकिन अगर फेडरल बैंक, श्याम श्रीनिवासन जी हैं, टाटा ट्रस्ट से सिद्धार्थ शर्मा जी हैं, नोवार्टिस हमारे साथ जुड़ा है, अगर ये सब नहीं जुड़ते तो शायद ये मुहिम जिस पहल और जिस लेवल पर हम करना चाहते हैं वो नहीं कर पाते। आपको क्या लगता है कि और लोगों को भी ऐसे कॉजेस से जुड़ना चाहिए?
अवश्य जुड़ना चाहिए। मैं मानता हूं कि ये केवल इवेंट नहीं है, ये इट इज वन पार्ट ऑफ नेशनल एजेंडा। ये देश के एजेंडा का एक पार्ट है। मैंने मेरी बात में बताया कि हमें देश के प्रति सभी का, हर नागरिक का कर्तव्य है। यहां कोई अच्छा सुझाव दे देंगे, मैं मानता हूं कि उन्होंने कर्तव्य का पालन किया है। यहां कोई हमारी कमियां को दिखा के उजागर करके हमारे सामने लाएंगे, मैं मानता हूं कि उन्होंने अपना कर्तव्य का पालन किया है। देश हम सबका है। स्वास्थ्य ये शायद व्यवस्था की दृष्टि से सरकार की जिम्मेवारी होगी, लेकिन उसमें सहयोगी होना हम सबकी जिम्मेवारी है। और इस साझा जिम्मेवारी से ही हम कोविड क्राइसिस के सामने लड़ पाए। आपने देखा होगा, कोविड क्राइसिस के दरमियान हर व्यवस्था के साथ जनता को जोड़ी और काम जनता ने किया, आउटपुट देश को मिला।
बहुत सही कहा आपने। मंत्री जी, श्याम श्रीनिवासन जी थोड़ी देर पहले जब मंच पर आए तो उन्होंने कहा हमारा इस कैंपेन का ध्येय ही टेस्टिंग और डिटेक्शन है, कि अवेयरनेस बढ़ाएं कि आप कैंसर के लिए टेस्टिंग करिए और डिटेक्शन करिए। उनकी एक ड्रीम है कि वो एक ऐसा एआई रूपी कुछ यंत्र बनाना चाहते हैं जो रूरल लेवल पर डिटेक्शन में मदद करे। आपको लगता है कि किसी तरह से ये मुहिम सरकार के साथ जुड़कर रूरल लेवल पर, गांव में, जहां पर डिटेक्शन और ट्रैकिंग में मदद कर सकती है?
अवश्य कर सकती है। और देखो, आज जो मैंने आपको इंडिया के हेल्थ मॉडल की बात की, हमारा मॉडल दुनिया के मॉडल से कैसे अलग है? एक बार एक बहुत बड़ी फार्मा कंपनी, मल्टीनेशनल कंपनी के सीईओ इंडियन थे। वो मुझे मिलने आए और उन्होंने मुझे कहा कि मंत्री जी, आपके हमारे कंट्री में, इंडिया में, वो मल्टीनेशनल कंपनी के सीईओ थे, वो आए थे यहाँ। तो उन्होंने मुझे कहा कि हमारा जीडीपी का 1.5% खर्च ही हेल्थ के पीछे होता है। उन्होंने कहा कि यूएसए में 6% होता है, इटली में 7% होता है, ब्रिटेन में इतने परसेंट होता है। उन्होंने अपने परसेंटेज की बात कही और उन्होंने कहा कि इंडिया ने भी अपने जीडीपी का खर्च हेल्थ के पीछे बढ़ाना चाहिए। तो मैंने उसको रिप्लाई देते हुए कहा कि हमने हेल्थ पॉलिसी बनाई है और हमने लक्ष्य रखा है कि हम 10 साल में, 5 साल चले गए, 5 साल में और 5 साल में हम उसको 2.5% तक ले जाएंगे और आगे भविष्य में हम उसके ऊपर काम करते जाएंगे। और बाद में मैंने उसको कहा कि उसका 7% होगा, किसी का 6% होगा। वहां का मॉडल और इंडिया का मॉडल में फर्क है। फर्क ये है, आज इंडिया में कोई डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऐसा नहीं होगा, कोई टाउन ऐसा नहीं होगा, कोई सिटी ऐसा नहीं होगा जहां चैरिटी से चलने वाली अस्पताल ना हो। हमारी सोसाइटी हेल्थ के लिए जिम्मेवारी उठाती है। अरे हमारे यहां एम्स या तो बड़ी बड़ी इंस्टीट्यूट में, टाटा इंस्टीट्यूट का नाम इतना बड़ा बना हुआ है, वहां से कोई बड़वे साहब कल प्राइवेट प्रैक्टिस चालू कर दे और एक कंसल्टेशन का वो 10,000 फीस रखे तो 10,000 फीस देके उसके पास पेशेंट आएगा। लेकिन मैंने ऐसे कई डॉक्टर देखे हैं, वो बड़ी इंस्टीट्यूट में बड़ा नाम होने के बाद भी वो इंस्टीट्यूट छोड़ी हो और बाद में 100 रुपीज में अपनी सेवा देते हो, 100 रुपीज में कंसल्टिंग चार्ज देते, ये भी टोकन के रूप में। ऐसी कई हॉस्पिटल में वो जाएंगे फ्री अपनी सेवाएं देने के लिए। ये हमारा मॉडल है, इसलिए यहां हेल्थ केयर एफोर्डेबल है। आधा खर्च सरकार के सापेक्ष में हमारी जनता ही उठा लेती है। चैरिटी हॉस्पिटल, एनजीओ के द्वारा चलने वाले हॉस्पिटल, कोई फैमिली ट्रस्ट बना के अस्पताल चलाते हैं। अरे कोई हॉस्पिटल में, प्राइवेट हो या गवर्नमेंट हो, देखना सीएसआर फंड आज अच्छी तरह से यूज करने वाले लोगों को सीएसआर फंड बहुत उदारता से मिल रहा है। ये हमारा मॉडल है। इसलिए पब्लिक पार्टनरशिप हेल्थ सेक्टर में ये हमारा नेचर में है, हमारा स्वभाव में है। और मैं मानता हूं कि किसी के पास भी ऐसा पब्लिक पार्टनरशिप का मॉडल हो। मैं एक सामान्य एग्जांपल दूं आपको। जब लास्ट प्रधानमंत्री जी के जन्मदिन के अवसर पर मैंने केवल आह्वान किया था, एक सभी इंडस्ट्रीज के साथ, जनप्रतिनिधियों के साथ एक मीटिंग की, और मैंने कहा कि मोदी जी ने कहा है कि हम 2025 अंत तक देश को टीबी मुक्त करना चाहते हैं। क्या हम निक्षय मित्र बने और टीबी पेशेंट को गोद ले? और उसके लिए मैंने एक डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म लॉन्च किया। मुझे बताते हुए खुशी हो रही है कि केवल 15 दिन में 1 लाख से अधिक लोग निक्षय मित्र बन के 12 लाख पेशेंट को गोद ले लिया।
क्या बात।
और उसको रेगुलर फोटो भेजते हैं। कार्यक्रम में सोशल मीडिया में ट्रैक करता हूं तो पता चलता है रेगुलर 1000 रुपए की न्यूट्रिएंट फूड की किट उसको पहुंचाते हैं। ऑफिसर लोगों ने गोद लिया, एनजीओ ने गोद लिया, मल्टीनेशनल हमारे कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर ने गोद लिया, प्राइवेट इंडिविजुअल लोगों ने गोद लिया, जनप्रतिनिधियों ने गोद लिया, और एक मुहिम जनता ने उठा ली। तो ऐसा कोई भी प्रयोग आपके कोई भी लोगों के मन में आइडिया आए, सरकार के साथ शेयर करना चाहिए। और सामूहिकता से, पब्लिक पार्टनरशिप से हमें देश के डिसीज को एड्रेस करने के लिए कोई मुहिम चलानी हो तो चलानी चाहिए।
आरंभ प्रचंड है, लेकिन ये अभी काम अधूरा है। इस पर हम बहुत कुछ काम करने वाले हैं। ये आपसे वादा है कि आपको कॉन्क्रीट रिजल्ट्स आने वाले दिनों में जरूर दिखेंगे। मनसुख मांडविया जी, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आभार आपका। प्लीज बिग राउंड ऑफ अप्लॉज।
थैंक यू
सर, एक आपसे रिक्वेस्ट है, ये कैंसर का एक छोटा सा आप पे पिन लगाना चाहता हूं जो हम सब ने यहां यूनाइटेड अगेंस्ट कैंसर के लिए लगाया है। Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. The crackdown on Khalistani elements, gangsters, goons, criminals who have made it a big business beyond the political ideology has begun, ladies and gentlemen, even as Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, in some real, plain, candid, hard talk, he has put nations on the notice. He has turned around and said that no longer will this selective agenda work. The global south is not just backing and voicing and rising, but India and all other nations expect all the West, especially, that was the message to them, that you cannot be selective and you cannot use terrorism, extremism as a political tool. More importantly, he was direct against Canada and Justin Trudeau, saying political compulsions cannot allow extremist acts and this business that's being run by these elements permissible. That's where the allegation was. Subramaniam Jaishankar clearly saying that if you can protect your sovereignty, so can Bharat. That's the message. And if you believe in a rules-based order, then you've got to walk the talk. Listen in.
Canada actually has seen a lot of organized crime, relating to the secessionist forces, organized crime, violence, extremism, they're all very, very deeply mixed up. So, in fact, we have been, talking about specifics and information. We have actually been badgering the Canadians. We've given them a lot of information about organized crime leadership, which operates out of Canada. There are a large number of extradition requests. There are terrorist leaders who have been identified. So do understand that there is an environment out there. Our diplomats are threatened. Our consulates have been attacked. And often comments are made about, there's interference in our politics. And a lot of this is often justified as saying, well, that's how democracies work. If you have to understand what is going on out there. And our concern is that, it's really been very permissive because of political reasons. I'm not part of the Five Eyes. I'm certainly not part of the FBI. So I think you're asking the wrong person. I'm not part of the Five Eyes. I'm certainly not part of the FBI. So I think you're asking the wrong person.
So organized crime, we've been badgering the Canadians and we've given them a mountain of evidence that has not been acted upon. And these extremist elements, why are they being made permissible? Are there political compulsions? Some interesting observations there, where this entire racket has now been called an organized crime by the foreign minister, and there is proof that points towards it. Closer home, ladies and gentlemen, the government has decided enough is enough. They started this crackdown sometime back in 2022 around August, when there was a policy decision taken that gangster networks and these crime networks will also be treated at par with terrorists and terror networks under the UAPA, because their involvement was increasingly evident in running these rackets. But is it largely a profiteering business and there is no ideology? That's the larger question that is now emerging amidst all of this. Another question is, how is it that they were proliferating in these Five Eyes nations itself? Let's try and understand what's happening closer home before we go across to our guest quickly. 53 locations, 7 states that include Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, NCR, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh. These are the places where the raids have been conducted, arms, ammunition have been seized, gangsters have been rounded up, and they are connected to multiple gangs. The NIA is conducting these raids with respect to 3 specific cases, but the gangs are multiple terror gangs. There is the Davinder Bambiya gang, the Lawrence Bishnoi Goldie Barar outfit, Arsh Dalla's outfit, there is Kala Jatedi and some other outfits. So multiple gangs have been cracked down upon. One of our close associates of Arsh Dalla has also been rounded up and picked up by the NIA. We are given to understand that the funding is being done through Hawala channels for drugs and for weapons. Khalistani gangster terror network is involved in terrorist funding and weapon supply. So the drugs come in from Pakistan, the support comes in from Pakistan, the drugs are sold here, the money is rerouted, and this network is spread in nations like Canada, Pakistan, the UAE, and of course the Five Eyes nations along with some other nations. And it's a complex network, but overall the agenda is profiteering, the agenda is money, it's a business which runs into immigration, into drugs, into gangs, crime, extortion, and of course smuggling of arms and ammunition and conducting certain terrorist activities for a larger profiteering gain. Let's go across to our guests quickly and get their thoughts on how this entire scenario evolves. Chris Blackburn is with us, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra is with us, Hemant Tatri with us, and Brahma Chalani with us. Namaste. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Chris Blackburn, are you inclined to believe this whole theory that these gangsters are all operating and this is largely a profiteering business, and then there are others who are perhaps layering it with their own sinister agendas?
Yeah, I think what's happening is, and it's exactly that the Khalistani movement has tried to get funds from using criminal means, and we've seen drug trafficking in Punjab, where it's been linked to the political sort of angle as well. And in the UK, we had the exact same phenomenon with the Irish Republican Army. The IRA, certain figures used organised crime, armed robberies, they even stole paintings from galleries and from wealthy estates. So we've seen that groups who engage in terrorism, they just sometimes they are humans at the end of the day, and they see these massive profits from criminal activities, and they become polluted. So I think for the Khalistanis, we're also seeing there's a lot of gang warfare between groups in the UK. We saw at the Kabaddi there was a Kabaddi competition in the Midlands in the UK recently, where we saw people who openly support Khalistan, and we have this extreme gang violence on the side. Now, are the two linked? In Derby, they said it wasn't, but I'm not so sure. But when we look at in the Punjab, where we're seeing arms stealing, we're seeing drugs, and we're seeing other kinds of criminal activity, I think Jaishankar and the NIA are exactly right. This is becoming a criminal racket, not just a terrorist sort of threat against India, but a criminal racket against the Punjab.
But have you been able to wrap your head around the fact that every nation's intelligence is always watching these elements? How do they then seep into positions of power? How do they get into positions of policy and administration with a certain level of influence in government or with governments?
Well, I think if we're going to try and compare what's happened in the UK and Canada, in Canada we've got literally high-ranking politicians and ministers who are sympathetic to the Khalistani cause. Now, those guys have effectively taken hostage the ruling party and Justin Trudeau's party. So they are coalition partners. So we've seen from Justin Trudeau's foreign policy advisor, he's actually came out and said, listen, we knew there was terrorist financing, but we wouldn't do it because we did not want to upset the Sikh vote bank. In the UK, we've seen very similar things to that, but not on the levels of Canada. We've seen where Khalistanis, especially those in the Midlands, have tried to normalise what was quite a radical fringe movement, are trying to normalise things in the UK, and they've literally taken over the all-parliamentary group on British Sikhs in the UK. So Khalistani radicalism is being normalised in the UK, and a lot of this is mainly due because people are basically naive about the threat. They don't understand how Khalistan is a radical movement which isn't supported by Sikhs in India. So it's been a growing problem of this, I'd say, the last 5 years in the UK, and we simply as British security analysts on the whole haven't looked at this problem in detail. However, that is changing.
Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, do you agree with the position taken by Dr. Jaishankar, or should we have taken this earlier? He's also mentioned in straight words there, some straight talk the way he says we've been badgering the Canadians with evidence and they have done nothing about it.
Well, one result of all this during the last 1 week is that the world is becoming more and more aware of what is actually happening inside Canada. Justin Trudeau had been talking about herd sovereignty and so on. Now, the worry of the world, or worry of at least India and those who are sympathetic to what India is saying, is the fact that Canada is running a criminal terrorist racket with the encouragement and the knowledge of Canadian authorities, especially Justin Trudeau. The Gurdwaras, there is a competition by Khalistanis to control them so that they can get the money of the offerings made by the people there. There are gang wars going on. There was a murder after Niger's murder. No one is talking about that. So situation is serious for Canada itself. So in that respect, I fully agree that we did well to confront Canada. We did well to challenge it, to give information which so far it has not given. We did well in exposing the fact that Canada has a major worry on its head in terms of the proliferation of these gangs and the proliferation of the criminal and terrorist elements there. So all in all, it is now for the Canadian people, not so much the government, because government, as the previous speaker said, is dependent upon the Khalistani elements for the 25 seats that they control in the parliament. It is for the Canadian people and right-thinking media personnel to now put pressure on the government to say that there is still time. You have to control these elements. You have to bring in your law and order machinery to effectively check them, and wherever necessary to put them in prison rather than granting them citizenship when they did not need it, like Niger.
I'll come back to Ambassador Dogra in just a bit, but Brahmachalani, you're not pulling any punches in calling out the Canadians and what's going on. But is there a larger game at play? Would you agree that this is organized crime, A? And secondly, would you want to hold the Five Eyes on the charge that they have been selective in their crackdown on extremism, and somewhere extremism has been used in a larger geopolitical game?
Yes, I agree with you, Anand. But I wish the Indian government had spoken up earlier about the indulgence of Canadians and others, indulgence of these violent Sikh separatists. For example, why are the Indian security agencies carrying out raids now? What were they doing earlier? Because India is concerned about violent Sikh secessionists using Canada, Britain, US, and Australia as a base. It's a long-standing concern. But there is also another issue, which is that the toxic intersection of violent separatism by Khalistanis, drug trade, and gun culture holds significant implications for the long-term security of Canada, of Britain, of the US, because these countries have been quite lenient. In fact, they have been willfully tolerant of the activities of these violent extremists. The Khalistan movement may be practically dead in India, but it's alive and kicking in sections of the Sikh diaspora living in the Anglosphere countries. The question is, why is the Khalistani movement gaining traction in these Anglosphere countries? And there's a murky side to this. There is increasing evidence of an unholy nexus between some Anglosphere security or intelligence agencies and prominent Khalistanis. Key extremists are not just being shielded by such agencies. Some also serve as intelligence assets, including possibly this guy, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. He's an American-Canadian dual citizen who recently made headlines by ordering Hindu Canadians on pain of punishment to flee from Canada. It is telling that Pannu, like some other Anglosphere-based Khalistani terrorists wanted in India, continues to operate with impunity. And then there is an issue about how these Khalistanis are funding their operations. It's very important to understand that the modus operandi of Khalistanis is to take control of cash-rich gurdwaras, whether they're located in Canada, Britain, US, or Australia. They use these gurdwaras as a base, both for stoking militancy among other Sikhs and for funding terrorist activities, including by diverting proceeds from narcotics trafficking and worshippers' donations. But more importantly, control of gurdwaras gives such militants cover as supposed religious figures. For example, if you look at the Canadian media, Hardeep Singh Nijjar has been described as president of a Gurdwara and quote-unquote a Sikh preacher. This is an international terrorist fugitive being described as a Sikh preacher. And one of the things these Khalistanis do in the Anglosphere is that to win political protection, these militants contribute at times generously to political parties' electoral campaigns, especially to help preferred candidates win. Canada is a prime example of that, of how Khalistani money has become so important to Trudeau's Liberal Party and to the New Democratic Party of Jagmeet Singh. These two parties are receiving tilted money from the Khalistanis.
But this activity doesn't limit itself only to Canada, Brahmachalani. So, I'm asking you, did the Five Eyes always know? Did it all happen under their watchful eyes, or did they turn a blind eye to this?
Obviously, there is a willful tolerance. They turned a blind eye to the Sikh militancy. They stoked the Sikh militancy because they thought that they could use it as a political tool against India, as leverage against India. So that's the reason why they have not only sheltered some key Khalistanis, they are shielding them. And Canada has emerged as the international epicenter of Khalistan militancy. But I think we should not forget the broader role of all the 5 Anglosphere countries in sheltering and shielding Sikh extremists fermenting terrorism in India. The problem for India is this: good relations with the Anglosphere countries are pivotal to the wider pursuit of India's diplomatic interests. So India has to tread very carefully, but I think it must leverage access to its huge market, including trade deals as well as geopolitical and military cooperation, to bring the Anglosphere countries under sustained pressure to stop tolerating violent Khalistanis.
But Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, before I bring in Hemant Tatri, thank you for your patience, Hemantji. I'll come to you in just a bit. Have we failed as a nation to separate the extremist elements from Sikhism and Sikhs altogether? Because everywhere the majority doesn't back this, but they feel intimidated. Have we failed somewhere to impress upon these nations that you've got to sift the two and crack down and don't allow these criminal extremist elements gain ground?
Well, that's a very good question, Anand, because if you think at a larger level, because you've been bringing in the Five Eyes repeatedly, and the sense of your question was whether there is a ganging up at the establishment level, and you made a distinction between the establishment and the large group of people of each country. Now, not everyone in these countries, let's say Western countries, is anti-India or not sympathetic to India in this particular instance. But the fact is that media uniformly, whether you read Wall Street, Washington Post, Times of London, or Guardian, or Telegraph, or any of these Economists, any of these newspapers and magazines, there is a uniform refrain which is bent on castigating India without giving it a chance or a fair hearing. So, if we think that, or if we are reasonably sure that for greater or lesser extent these magazines and newspapers reflect either the opinion of the people or the directions of the establishment or the government in their cases, then I think we have failed, because we should have been able to put across our case effectively and well in time from the day Trudeau went to the parliament and made those preposterous claims. The second thing is, even America, which is otherwise a strategic partner of India, has repeatedly over the last 7-8 days been saying in not very soft tones, but sort of saying clearly that India has to cooperate with the intelligence that has been provided to it. Now, there are two questions. Canada as well as America have admitted that America was the first one to give communications intelligence to Canada. Now, if America had given that intelligence, why doesn't it set an example by giving it to us? The second thing is, why doesn't it put pressure on Canada to give whatever intelligence it has collected to India? Because India has repeatedly said they have given us no information at all. Another thing, and a slight departure from this question, is that the British Home Secretary, the British Home Minister, she said yesterday, I think, that multiculturalism in Britain is a failure. That means that the immigrants who were treated at par are no longer at the same level. That's the rough kind of translation of what she said. Now, where it hurts them, then immigrants are to be regarded differently, probably even as second-rate citizens. But where it suits them for political convenience, as in Canada, then they are to be accommodated, not just politically, but also in terms of their demands and their wishes, which in this case is the Khalistani extremism and all that is associated with it. So we have a complex situation where the West or the Five Eyes refuse to recognize that they are going down a path which will lead them to an impossible situation that starts hurting them. And I hope they pause and rethink those policies of putting pressure on India and hoping that India will then buckle down to whatever they want. Firstly, that is not going to happen. Secondly, it might hurt them at a time when they want India as an example of democracy versus the authoritarian states of the world, meaning China. So, and they have to be careful because China just yesterday issued a white paper where it demands a resetting of the world according to the conditions and proposals it had given in that white paper. So the world is at a difficult stage, and the earlier there are voices of reason and sanity that prevail in the Five Eyes or the Western world in general, instead of pressurizing countries like India, the better it is.
You make a fair point, but just drawing the attention closer home, Hemant Attri, finally this crackdown is happening, but is this again a half-hearted attempt? Could this have been done earlier? And more importantly, does this now prove that this is nothing but a business, organized, crime-driven agenda, not a political ideology?
Certainly, Anandji, it could have been handled better, and particularly as far as Prime Minister, the Canadian Prime Minister is concerned, he could have handled it far, far better than what he has done. His conduct in his parliament and otherwise abroad also, the way he has spoken about it, particularly he is saying that he has reliable evidence on this, without sharing anything, without sharing an iota. Basically, what Justin Trudeau has done, he doesn't understand that diplomacy is more serious a business than playing to the local theatrics. What he has done with this, he is trying to gain the falling ratings, which he is losing very fastly in Canada. What he is doing there now, he is not able to explain to his own opposition, forget about India. But their opposition is asking. They are asking, Mr. Trudeau, what are you doing? What evidence you have, you please share it. Neither he is sharing the evidence with their local opposition, nor with India also. Now the thing is, India had been asking since 2014 about this gentleman Nizar, who is no more, unfortunately. What action did Justin Trudeau government take? 2014, there was an arrest warrant against him. They took no step. And all my previous speakers have already pointed it out. Now the issue is, what are the I-5 countries doing? 4 of them, at least 4 of them, they are basically becoming a harboring point for all these separatist elements. I don't call them Khalistanis basically. They are separatists who are trying to gain advantage, take advantage of the international scenario by claiming there to be a particular minority which is suffering. That is not the case. These people, whoever their separatists are, they are basically getting shielded where? Britain, Canada, Australia and US. 4 of them are actively giving them the shield. How many of them have been extradited in last 10 years? Can you please tell me? Indian government has time and again, at least 12 times, they have given the list of 28 separatists. Is one of them, tell me one single name who has been extradited. Issue is, basically Canada is not able to understand one thing, or for that matter Britain also, that if they start rearing these kind of separatist snakes in their own courtyard, they are not going to spare them. And the evidence has also started coming in. All these, youngsters who are going from Punjab and different part of the country, who are going to study there and work visas in Canada, you know what is happening with them? They are falling prey to these elements. They are having a monopoly on all those smaller menial jobs. They charge them and they pay them very lowly. That's what the whole mafia is about. My previous speakers, they referred to Gurdwara money, this money, all this. I fully agree to that. But furthermore, they are extending their wings. All these students who are part-time working there
Right.
along with their studies, they are being paid very lowly. For the very simple reason, these people, these separatists, they are charging from them in lieu of the commission that the work they are being offered. This is another thing that they are doing it. Canadian government has to understand one thing, that they can't shirk the responsibility of what they are doing. These people, whosoever they are, they may be today politically supporting Mr. Trudeau. Tomorrow, what they will do? If they are not stopped here and now. See, I5 countries have also to understand that they can't have dual standards. America has to understand this, and that is the simple reason why Canadian Prime Minister is not getting the support that he was expecting from I5 countries also, as well as from within his country.
But is that time gone now, Hemant Atri? And that's what I'm going to final round of questions with everybody. And Chris Blackburn, can nations get away with first cultivating terrorists, then designating them terrorists, and then killing them on foreign soil, saying we did it to protect our sovereignty, while they continue to harbor elements which are inimical to other nations? Can the likes of
Certainly.
US, UK, Canada get away with it now?
Anandji, it has been a very old tactics. See, if you go by the history, what US has been doing, Osama bin Laden, who created it? There are n number of examples. Pakistan is an example. All those people who ISI was feeding at one point in time, they are fighting against them. The same thing happened in Afghanistan. It happened everywhere in the world. I fail to understand why these I5 countries don't gain experience and take decisive action against all these kind of separatist forces. It may be World K or some other groups working all around the globe. They have to understand this thing, which you are rightly pointing out.
That's exactly
that
my
they
point,
can't
Hemanji. I'm just going to bring in Chris Blackburn back. Chris,
Yeah.
where do you stand on this? Do
Well,
you
I think-
think the kind of attack that happened on the Indian consulate in London would have been allowed on the American consulate or even on the Chinese consulate? Clearly,
No.
there's something more than meets the eye.
Well, I think if you look at it another way, I think we've just come back off a 20-year US-led global war on terrorism, where I think most of these things we've been discussing today about terrorists using other countries as safe haven was the primary argument that the Americans used. They used it against the UK actually, which was quite an important thing. But I think you're right. Would they have allowed the attacks on the Indian or the US embassy in London? No, those guys would have been shot down by counter-terrorism police, right? And guys who are armed guards who basically are allowed to protect the US embassy, they would have been shot, right? Anybody trying to scale the wall, they would have been pulled down, dragged down, or they would have been shot simply as a threat to the US. So you're right on that front, and I think, but the UK has reacted to that. We put more armed guards outside of the embassy. We put places where protests have to be across the street. All these kinds of things have been put in operation, and not only that, the British Prime Minister and the security ministers have all said, listen, we are going to take pro-Khalistan extremism seriously, and it's so serious they've even now abbreviated as PKE. So you know a government's serious when they have abbreviations like that. So I think the UK is certainly reacting in a positive way, as are other countries, and I think Canada is holding out on this issue, and we all know why. There's no sort of secret there. We know that the Canadians got humiliated, especially CSIS, the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service, got humiliated in 2010 when Prime Minister Stephen Harper wanted to get at the bottom of what happened with Air India 182. So the Canadians were embarrassed, the intelligence, so they've still got axes to grind against India. And we know that Justin Trudeau's party and the politics of Canada are compromised. So Canada is a special situation in this one. And other nations do want to have good partnerships and good relations with India, and they are moving towards that. But I think the Canadians, as we know, it's in special measures here.
Final question, Brahmachalani ji. One aspect is we've given you so much of information, yet you harbor elements which are inimical to our country. If you can get into other territory and take out those who are a threat to your sovereignty, why can't we? Not that I'm saying we are doing it, I'm just hypothetically, should India maintain that position? Israel has been unabashed about it, although they've veiled it under the cloak of plausible deniability. America has been openly brash about it, with the president itself thumping his chest and saying, "We got Zawahiri in Kabul." That's foreign land.
Problem is this, Anand, that there are more than 100 UN designated global terrorists based in Pakistan who are thumping their noses at India. And India has not taken out a single such dreaded terrorist. It's not in India's intelligence culture to assassinate anyone on foreign soil. But there's a simple way to handle this problem. A number of prominent Canadians in recent days have pointed out that with the FATF content to look the other way, Canada has done little to ensure that its territory is not used for terrorist financing. That holds the key. If Canada were to cut off terrorist financing, it would choke the Khalistani movement in Canada. Unfortunately, Ottawa appears to have learned no lesson from the 1985 Air India flight bombing. That bombing happened because Canada was harboring dangerous terrorists and extremists and was ignoring India's repeated pleas to hand them over for prosecution. And today, we are faced with a diplomatic crisis between Canada and India because of allegations that arise from the murky world of espionage, where the line between information and disinformation gets easily blurred for geopolitical ends. But I think if there is a silver lining, it is this, that Trudeau's gambit, instead of putting India in the international dock, appears to have boomeranged. At home, Trudeau is facing increasing pressure to come clean and present hard evidence to back his allegations against India. And furthermore, his allegations are helping to focus global attention on Canada's role as a safe haven for terrorists, war criminals, and other extremists from multiple countries. And India's long-standing concern over Canada's reluctance to rein in violent extremists is now getting attention even in the Canadian media. This is the first time in the Canadian media is reporting on India's concerns. So in a way, one of the unintended consequences of Trudeau's misstep, blunder in airing these suspicions, these allegations, is that he himself, his own standing at home, has taken a beating.
Thank you for your thoughts, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on this discussion. Although India's official position is, where's the proof? Show to us that we have done it. But the sentiment amongst the Indian people largely, we're given to understand is, if you've really done it, well done. This ghus ke marenge tag or this claim, many believe that it's time we lived up to that claim. We leave you with that thought. See you after a very, very short break. A very interesting, engaging conversation with some global voices on this entire current scenario between Canada and India on this K factor. Stay with us.
There's always been concern from the southern industries, especially from the Malayalam industry, that their films are not really considered. It's only one section of the movies that are considered. But this time, all this has been laid to rest. There has been huge technical aspects also involved in this movie, because we saw the extent of damage and how the floods were in 2018 when it had happened in the state of Kerala. So they had created all this, the flood situation, all this. So technically also it was at a different level.
Right, do stay on with me. Jude Anthony is now joining us on the phone line. So thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Congratulations to you, first of all. Your first reaction to being the official entry of India to the Oscars.
I am really thankful to the people of Kerala. were staying together during the flood time, and this is a tribute to the Kerala people, the Malayalis, the Indians. So I'm very happy and I'm very much honored to get this. I can't express my happiness over the phone. I'm really happy.
Absolutely. Mr. Anthony, was this expected, or were you surprised when this announcement was made?
I was very much surprised to get this call. I am so excited. This was not expected. And thank God, thank you to the film fraternity of India.
One last question before I let you go. Have you spoken to any of your cast or crew members? Have you spoken to...
No, this is the first call I got regarding the same, so I have to call them after this call, get connected and disconnected, and I have to call my family, or everybody will be waiting for this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Congratulations to you and to your entire team. We do hope to catch up with you and the team perhaps later in the day as well. But thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. 2018, the Malayalam film is official entry of India to the Oscars. It was a 22 shortlisted movie list, out of which we now see 2018 as the chosen one. It is the chosen entry to the 2024 Oscar Awards. This is a film that is a survival drama. It talks about tales of despair, it talks about tales of hope, and those of unsung heroes as far as the Kerala floods are concerned. Floods and stories that Kerala had not witnessed in decades together. All of that was brought from real to real, and that is going to be India's official entry to 2024 Oscar Awards. On that note, slipping into a quick break, back in just a few minutes. India's Oscar entry has now been announced. We're given to understand that Malayalam film 2018 is the official entry to the Oscars for 2024. That announcement has just come to the fore a short while ago. That press conference was happening even as we speak. Vishal Chatkara, my colleague, now joining us, getting us more details on this. Yes, Vishal.
Well, congratulations to everybody, because 2018 film that celebrates the spirit of people of Kerala has been chosen as India's Oscar entry. There was a lot of anticipation around other films, other Hindi films like the Kerala story, but the jury actually shortlisted 22 films, and out of that they watched each one of them, and there were a lot of hype around this, but this Tavino's Thomas starrer is the winner. It talks about people of Kerala who came together to help each other during the 2018 flood. It starred Tavino Thomas. Many congratulations to the director, to the team, and now all eyes at the Oscars, where the film will be competing in the official foreign language film category.
And Vishal, it wasn't just a critically acclaimed movie, it was also a commercially hit movie, isn't it? It was the highest grossing Malayalam film of all time, if I'm not mistaken.
No, the figure I'm not aware, but yes, it's a highly acclaimed film. It starred Tavino Thomas, and not just the film actors who spoke nicely about the film, but also actors like Dulquer Salmaan who spoke and complimented filmmakers and the people of Kerala, who repeatedly said, you know, how in 2018 the way they managed the floods, and it's a big win and a very apt choice for Indian filmer to be reflected at the Oscars.
Absolutely, like you said, the shortlist was of 22 films, but this is the movie that has been chosen by the jury, by the panel that was looking into what India's official entry is going to be. 2018 is the Malayalam film that is going to be India's official entry into the foreign category. It is a survival drama, if we could say so, as far as the Kerala floods are concerned, of tales of despair, tales of hope, and the bravery that was shown by many. The unsung heroes really were what was celebrated in this movie, Vishal, isn't it?
Yes, truly. You know, I have to also speak about the other films which were doing the round. There's a film called Vati, which talks about, a debate over government-funded education. It's a Dhanush starrer against the private schools. That was also being talked about. Then there was a film called Bhagwan Bharose, that's the Sriraditya's directorial debut. That was in the running. I was talking to a couple of jury members before the big announcement. They were saying they're very particular. They don't want to repeat what happened last year in the Oscars. They got a lot of flack, I think, for sending. They were not a flack, but it was quite controversial when the Discovery decided to send Cello Show instead of RRR. So they really want to sit and select a film that reflects the true sense, the spirit of India to the Oscars.
Right, Vishal, thank you so much for getting us the latest on that. Neetu, my colleague, also joining us to get us more perspective on this. Neetu, we've been talking about India's official entry to the Oscars. This is a Malayalam film, one that is critically acclaimed, one that was commercially a hit as well. What are the kind of reactions that we are seeing? Have you had any word from the cast, the crew? Were they expecting this?
See, 2018 was a huge hit. It was a huge. It was a Malayalam film based on the 2018 floods that the state had witnessed. In 100 years, the state hadn't witnessed something like this. So this movie had all aspects of the 2018 floods. It was very well accepted commercially as well as critically. So we are yet to get word from the makers of the movie. But the news just coming in is that this has been selected as India's official entry into the Oscars.
It was a 17-member panel, Neetu, that decided on which film is going to make the cut. 2018 was chosen the winner. And in the past, we've seen several criticisms come to the fore as far as Oscar entries are concerned. But perhaps this is going to be either unanimous decision, so to say, or there are very little faults that are going to be found with this particular decision, don't you think?
Yes, that's what we think, because as I said, even when the movie released also, it was well received. There has been several criticism earlier related to the entries from the country, especially when it comes to entries like this. There's always been concern from the southern industries, especially from the Malayalam industry, that their films are not really considered. It's only one section of the movies that are considered. But this time, all this has been laid to rest. There has been huge technical aspects also involved in this movie, because we saw the extent of damage and how the floods were in 2018 when it had happened in the state of Kerala. So they had created all this, the flood situation, I mean all this. So technically also it was at a different level.
Right, do stay on with me. Jude Anthony is now joining us on the phone line. So thank you so much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Congratulations to you, first of all. Your first reaction to being the official entry of India to...
Let me first ask you, how would you see this entire Khalistani saga that's now unfolding?
Well, it's a very difficult situation. It's a difficult situation for India. Canada has got itself into a difficult situation too. And of course, there are other countries as well that are watching this all unfold, and they're watching it very closely.
But how is it that this activity is largely in the Five Eyes? The five allies who are supposed to help each other with intelligence inputs. If you see the trends, most of the Khalistani activity or this extremist activity has unfolded on the soil of these nations, be it Australia, New Zealand, the UK, America, and of course, Canada.
I think that's one of those kind of historical accidents. That's where the diaspora has spread. So we've got sizable Indian diasporas in each one of those countries. We've also got sizable Sikh diasporas, and of course the Sikh diaspora, takes up a bigger proportion of the diaspora as a whole overseas. So while it might be a very small population within India, it's a much larger population, in Australia, where I think the last count we had here in Australia, I reckon around 40% or so of our Indian diaspora comes from Punjab or from nearby, and many of those obviously are Sikh. So just as a result of that accident, and because of then the activism and some of the militancy that we've seen over the last couple of years, that's why it's concentrated in these places and perhaps not in other areas.
But majority of the Sikhs have rejected this agenda outright. If there is no traction for it in India, clearly there is no traction there on these. So it's a handful of elements.
So my next question is, so did the Five Eyes turn a blind eye to it, or did it actually happen under their watchful eyes?
Have been aware, in Australia, I think we've been very aware of what's been going on in Canada and the United States and in the UK as well over the last few years, that this kind of militant element, which, as you say, is a very small proportion of the population, has been growing more vocal, perhaps attracting more support and so on. I know that it's being watched carefully, but whether or not there's been enough kind of proactive intervention in those communities, that's another question, I think. And so I think that's where, and I've written about this as well, where some of the governments like Australia needs to look more carefully at how they are managing this issue as it's grown up in the last couple of years.
Would you support Justin Trudeau for what he did under credible allegations and credible reasons to go outright and make those statements on the floor of Parliament? Or would you have wanted him to vet all the intelligence inputs with proper investigation on ground, thoroughly vet the charges before making an allegation like this?
Well, it's a very serious allegation to make. And as you're suggesting, it's quite a big step to take diplomatically to go and stand up on the floor of Parliament and to declare these things. I think if it had been, if I was advising a prime minister, this would probably not be the best track that I would support. The Canadians have argued that they have raised these issues diplomatically prior to the G20, that Trudeau had raised it with Mr. Modi during the G20 summit itself. And so the Canadians have argued, well, they've been frustrated, they haven't got where they would like to go, and so this is why Mr. Trudeau has ended up in the situation that he has. But it's a big step to take, and it is risky. And of course, if you can't provide, immediately provide evidence that's going to be convincing in the court of public opinion, then that becomes quite difficult.
Good evening and a warm welcome to Brass Tacks. I'm Griha Atul Siddiqui. In the latest rounds of sparring between India and Canada over the killing of Khalistani separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia last June, now External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said that India had told the Canadian government that it is not its policy to engage in such acts. He's also gone on to say that Canada had, quote-unquote, a very permissive environment for secessionist activities. Now remember, this comes even as there were conjectures that were being drawn on India's silence after the first set of responses that branded the Canadian allegation as absurd, going on further to suspend visa services for Canada and calling out Canada for offering a quote-unquote safe haven for terrorists. This kind of language so far was only